Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Commerce Today. This is episode 148. And last week we talked about and I actually showed you some agentic AI browsers and the way AI is changing how we use the internet and especially the web. This week we're going to talk about the next step. So if you watched last week's episode, please highly recommend it. You will not believe what OpenAI's Atlas browser can and sometimes can't do, both for B2C and B2B shopping. It was very interesting. But if you watch that episode, you may have seen how once it gets to checkout, things get a little dicier for an AI browser. It has a little bit harder time. Some of the AI browsers just absolutely refuse to do anything. And that is where this week's topic comes in: agentic payment standards. And basically, it's a fancy way of saying agentic payment standards, just a fancy way of saying a way for an AI to communicate programmatically, like via an API, with your website to complete a purchase instead of just clicking through the forms like the browsers currently try to do. So right now, most of the time, users are having to actually complete the checkout process. When these new payment standards are implemented, then they won't have to do that anymore. It's going to be interesting. There is definitely a race and a competition here, and whoever gets this right is going to really unlock kind of the next level of autonomous shopping, which I'm both excited and a little scared for. But why do we need new payment standards? Right now, the current flows that are used in e-commerce for online purchases, they all assume there's a human there and that there's a human clicking and doing things. So especially think about your authentication, maybe logging in, or especially like entering your CVV code, that little 3-digit code on the back of your credit card, so that it knows that you actually have that credit card. Think about the fraud checks. Maybe that's sending you a one-time password, those little auth codes you'll get via text message. That could be 3D secure. I know a lot of y'all out there in the e-commerce world have implemented that, where it may actually pop up a challenge question from the customer's issuing bank for their credit card. All of these were designed around the basic assumption that there is a human being sitting behind the screen, driving the process, completing the purchase. That's not the case anymore with these agentic shoppers and with the new AI browsers. And it's interesting, we'll actually see here in a little bit, there's a few different groups tackling this, and some of them are just worried about the most basic aspect of like, how do we get the payment data from wherever the user has it to the AI agent to the merchant without the user having to do anything. So it's almost like, how do we solve a wallet kind of question? Others, though, that are taking, I think, a better look at this are saying, okay, but how do we also prove that this is truly authorized, that the AI didn't go off the rails and is spending the user's money without their knowledge? Like, how do we know? And so there's obviously some concerns there for customers. Consumers want to know that AI isn't going to go rogue with their wallet. The banks that are issuing these credit cards also want to know they're not going to have stolen credit cards. They're not going to have transactions being charged back or disputed because people say, oh, I didn't actually authorize that. So in the span of, I think, less than a month, we've gotten 3 new standards for agent checkouts to really align the users with their agents, with the merchants, with the credit card networks themselves. And there are 3 main contenders as of now. I have to say that because the last time I recorded an episode on this, there were no contenders, there were no standards, and I said, hey, maybe somebody like Google is going to come out with a standard soon like they did with the shopping data feeds and all the other standards that Google has come out with. Then, like the next day, they did that. So I want to be careful to say, as of late October, there are 3 main contenders. I don't see any others emerging, but I could be surprised. And the 3 contenders are AP2, ACP, and TAP. And I'll go over each one in a lot more detail, but basically AP2, this is a coalition led by Google, Adobe, PayPal, Amex, and MasterCard are all involved as well. ACP, this is OpenAI doing what they like to do and trying to go it alone, or in this case with Stripe, and set the standard so that everyone has to use their service and their system. And then TAP or TAP, which I want to talk to some people at Visa about this. This is actually Visa's approach. Visa has said they're going to come out with verified by Visa for agents. So it's only going to be for Visa cards for now. And it's also just so confusing because they called it TAP, which we'll see what that stands for in a second. But if you Google for Visa TAP, you're just going to get all sorts of stuff about their tap to pay cards and the tap to pay process. So not necessarily the best naming there. I will say that The ACP protocol very clearly was OpenAI's attempt to be first to market. They wanted something very pragmatic, something they could launch very quickly, something that merchants could implement very quickly. AP2 and TAP both take a longer view. I will say that AP2 I feel like has a almost a philosophical aspect to it of trying to prevent the very vendor lock-in that ACP is going to create. And TAP is very security focused, as you might expect with something out of Visa. But let's dive into each of these. So AP2, this is the Agent Payments Protocol. The stated goal, and I find this funny since it came out like a day or two before or after the OpenAI protocol. AP2 stated goal is to create an open universal protocol to avoid fragmentation, to avoid, say, having 3 different agent payment protocols. The core concept behind it is mandates, which I think is an interesting way to look at this. So mandates, they are actually cryptographically signed, tamper-proof consent. One of the mandates in this protocol is actually the intent mandate. So the AI agent or AI browser actually has to capture where and how you, the user, said, I want you to buy me some green shoes, spend no more than $100. And it actually makes that tamper-proof, signs it cryptographically, and attaches it to the transaction. And that becomes something that actually flows with all the transaction data through the whole process. So anyone that has the payment data will also see when and how the customer expressed their intent to the AI to do this. So that way, you can't say, oh, I never said up to $100. I said up to $50. No, it's actually attached to the transaction, that intent mandate. There's also a cart mandate. So this is where the AI agent shows that it will put together the final cart, show it to the user, and get the user's okay on the price. And again, it attaches all of that to the transaction. So that proof payload does travel with the transaction. Anyone involved in touching that payment can then verify these different mandates. It's actually designed very specifically and almost the opposite of ACP. AP2 is designed to be very payment method agnostic. Credit cards can support it, specific banks, bank transfers could support it, crypto could support it. Like it can be, you can use any payment method with it if you do the integration work. There's actually some very big names backing it. I mentioned earlier, obviously, Google, Adobe, PayPal, Amex, MasterCard. There's other platforms, other banks, big credit card processors. And what I love about this is those who have watched Commerce Today or have known me for a long time. I'm a big fan of open source software. It came up through open source PHP content management systems, that e-commerce platforms. So open source is very near and dear to my heart. And AP2 actually has an open source reference implementation. They're not going to hide anything behind NDAs or contracts or anything like that. Anybody can actually go out and look and see how this works. So AP2, their angle, in addition to what I mentioned as far as wanting to have a universal open protocol, they actually provide the strongest audit trail so that you can prove that, yes, this AI agent or this AI browser is making the purchase correctly. It is something that the user authorized and the user did approve the expense. It does require a little bit more infrastructure and development work as a result. Moving on to the flip side of that protocol, ACP, the Agentic Commerce Protocol. So the goal with ACP really is to run transactions as fast as possible. Like you can tell that OpenAI wanted something they can get live as fast as possible. They also want merchants to be able to get it live as fast as possible. So it has the lowest technical lift as far as how to implement it. It is an open standard, sort of. It's very heavily influenced and steers you towards OpenAI, ChatGPT, Stripe, and their partners. The way it works, though, is basically instead of these mandates and these cryptographic signatures and this proof process that travels with the transaction, it basically just kind of does what we already do a lot in the e-commerce world, especially for a headless site, in that the agent just talks directly to the merchant's backend. So your backend systems, your APIs, the agent will connect to a product feed to get current price and stock information. And then the agent also will expect you to expose a checkout API so that the agent can create, update, or complete an order. Now, this method, unlike some of the other ones we're talking about today, it completely delegates the payment process. So the agent just passes a secure payment token, and then the merchant charges it via its gateway. So basically, on the agent side, the user side, they have put a credit card into their AI agent or into their AI browser. That has been tokenized by Stripe into a Stripe token that a Stripe merchant can charge against. And that token is what is given then to the website, and then you just process that through Stripe like you normally would. This is actually already live with instant checkout and ChatGPT. It is a very limited number of sites. Etsy was actually the very first, but there are more coming. This approach honestly feels more like just adding a new sales channel, so adding a new marketplace. And it's a very similar process. This is basically exactly how Pinterest buyable pins, the initial version back in 2016, 2017, that's exactly how it worked. And so this is not really that new. It's just taking some of the existing technologies, putting it together in a specific way with a specific credit card processor, and calling it the Agentic Commerce Protocol. Finally, TAP, the Trusted Agent Protocol. This is Visa's move. You'll notice that earlier I mentioned that AP2 is supported by Amex, by MasterCard. I did not mention Visa. That is because Visa is doing their own thing. And basically what they want to do is almost make AI agents part of the credit card network, part of the processing system. And so you can almost look at it, if you have stores, in each store you have a terminal, which is just the machine that you can swipe or tap a credit card on. Basically, agents will have credentials that identify them almost like credit card terminals. And then users can actually approve and say, these are the agents that I authorize my cards to be used with. Transactions are then signed by the agent saying this is being presented by this specific agent. And then the Visa network can verify that, just like it would verify if a given credit card terminal is still an active, valid terminal being used by a merchant. Most likely for the merchants, there will be very minimal to no work needed to implement this. This will be entirely between Visa and the AI agent providers. But because of that, you really have to wait to see, okay, are any of the providers actually going to support this protocol? There's not much you can do with it. It is very focused on Visa credit cards only, which I think is a honestly weird play. I understand from a business sense why Visa might want to do that, but from a like actually getting users to use it, if you're told, hey, through OpenAI's protocol, through the ACP, you can put a credit card on file with ChatGPT and then you can go buy from any site, like any credit card, and then you can use it for any site that supports ACP. Cool. TAP, the Visa system, you actually have to put only Visa cards on file, and then it has to be agents that already support this protocol. So it's, I don't know, it's just, it feels a little clunky to me. It's making the user stop and think, oh wait, am I using a Visa or a MasterCard? And that just seems weird. It's also, Visa's kind of slow playing this, so it's a closed system. They're really just playing up the branding angle of verified by Visa for agents. It's an interesting approach. But let's compare these now. Let's look at what these three different protocols are, and then we'll talk some about what it means for you as an e-commerce merchant. So comparing the trust mechanisms, AP2, the Google-led standard, that is all about those per purchase mandates. So you have that very rich, detailed, auditable intent of this specific user asked this AI to do this action and authorized this purchase, this date and time, etc. So very easy to document and prove, which I think, as someone who's been working with these large language models for a number of years now, you always want to be able to audit those things, because sometimes you'll ask an AI to do something very simple and it will do something very different and unexpected. So having those intents, it's just adding a little bit of logging and traceability. So the ACP system, that's the one from OpenAI, that protocol really just focuses on, for trust, on the API handshake. The same way any other API integration works right now, it's going to verify, okay, is this an authorized user system to access this API? Beyond that, then it just goes through Stripe's normal risk controls and fraud detection. The scope of each of these protocols is a little bit different. So AP2, again, starting with the one from Google, that one has a very broad scope. It's really designed to where it could be B2C, B2B. It doesn't even just have to be e-commerce. It could be used in a lot of different agentic contexts. ACP, the one from OpenAI, is really focused on retail, B2C, e-commerce via ChatGPT. That's what it's focused on. They are saying it's open and other systems could implement it. I just don't see that happening. And then TAP, obviously, TAP, the Visa standard, is very narrow in scope. It's just credit card payments in the Visa ecosystem. Now, efforts. You might have noticed that I have a little bit of a philosophical preference for AP2, but I will say, and that's the Google standard. ACP, though, the one from OpenAI, while philosophically I don't love what they're doing, they have made that so easy to implement. That is for a merchant that, say, wants to offer some sort of agentic checkout capability, like in the next few weeks before Christmas, if you were going to try something like that, try ACP. It is the easiest, lowest lift, especially if you have an existing system, existing e-commerce platform that already has these API endpoints. Most of y'all already have the product feeds and already have the API set up. It would just need some light massaging to get it to work within the ACP standard. AP2, once platforms are building this in, and I know Adobe is one of the founding members of the AP2 kind of consortium around the standard, so I expect to see this in Adobe Commerce and Magento very soon. And AP2 is going to be easy to implement once it's built into your platform. Until then, you can actually run a DIY pilot of this standard. It is an open source specification, so anyone can support it. But if you're the first person doing it on a platform, basically, it is going to require more effort than the ACP system. And the good news about TAP, Visa Standard, is as a merchant, there's not really anything you can do. You have to wait until your payment gateway or acquiring bank supports it, and until people want to use it, and until the different agent platforms want to use it. Now, diving into the philosophy a little bit more, AP2 is an open coalition of multiple different companies. Google is running the same playbook they've run on a number of other open web standards. This honestly is reminding me a lot of Google versus Apple around things like progressive web apps and other web standards, where Google really did lead the charge in wanting things to be fair, open, and to prevent walled gardens. And Apple, as much as I love them, is a walled garden. And so you can almost look at AP2 and ACP as Google versus Apple, even though ACP is not Apple, it's OpenAI. But it's the same kind of approach as far as AP2 is very open. ACP, it has an open specification, but it definitely pushes you towards very specific things that right now only OpenAI and Stripe are able to do. And then obviously TAP, it's very locked in. You have to be accepting Visa cards, and it only works with Visa cards. I will say where each one shines, both AP2 and TAP, if you're selling regulated products, higher ticket products, things where you want a higher level of assurance, both of those processes are going to provide that. I really like what AP2 is doing with those mandates. I think that's going to help beyond just agentic shopping. That's going to help with some fraud and chargeback management as well, I feel like. ACP is 100% focused on consumer retail and just getting it live and collecting revenue as quickly as possible. So what should you do? Especially as I'm recording this episode, it is late October 2025. Some of y'all are brave or a little bit crazy like I am and may actually consider implementing one of these things before Christmas. Even if you're not that crazy, I would say stay very close to the action. These things are evolving literally daily. Things are changing. Like I mentioned in last week's episode about the AI browsers, OpenAI's Atlas browser is being updated multiple times a day, often with major new functionality or user experience changes. Things are moving fast. If you are on a Google-backed platform or Adobe or Magento, I would definitely watch the AP2 standard and watch when that rolls out into those platforms, because at that point, in theory, it should be basically just a matter of entering some credentials or turning some configuration items on. If you are not on one of those platforms and you want something you can spin up right away, start reading through the ACP documentation from OpenAI. Consider getting in on an early pilot if you're already seeing a lot of traffic to your site from ChatGPT, because that would indicate that ChatGPT. Oh, And hey, Google feels left out. So my Google Home Hub wants to talk to me. This is actually the first time it's done that episode. So where was I? So ACP, if you're getting a lot of traffic from ChatGPT, then I would say that indicates ChatGPT is recommending your products. I would definitely look at doing a pilot of the ACP system. You also should start talking to your merchant bank, your credit card processor, about agent payments. Maybe mention AP2 and TAP to them and ask them if that's something that is on their own roadmap. If you are on Shopify, then I know they are working to add support for ACP very quickly. If that's not available to you yet, then start working on your product data. And we're actually in the next episode, we're going to talk a lot more about what you can do right now with no budget, a little budget, or a lot of budget to be ready for these systems. And data hygiene, product catalog hygiene is probably the biggest thing. And yeah, I will actually save the rest of what you can do to get ready for that for next week's episode when we talk about AI readiness and what you need to be doing in November, December 2025 and into 2026. We'll say that agent payments are moving from hype to implementation a lot faster than I think anybody expected. It was just a few weeks ago I was talking to you about the potential future of AI agents and how AI agents could shop on your site and how we would probably need some standards around that. And hey, standards are here, not just one, not just two, but three. I will say that as you roll this out and just thinking and speaking to Google and Adobe and OpenAI, it's great that we have convenience, but we have to have both convenience and trust. So as we're implementing these things, we have to give users and merchants the convenience they want, make these transactions as seamless as possible. We can't lose sight of the trust and safety aspects of this. And that's where I do think the AP2 protocol is going to win out because it balances both of those. So yeah, just make sure you are starting to get your store agent ready if you haven't already jumped straight into AP2 or ACP implementation. And if you have any questions about this, I know there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of stuff I've thrown around pretty quickly in this episode. Please find me on LinkedIn. My name is Joshua Warren. I have a Creativity Gold background behind my headshot. You'll also see my book, the E-commerce Growth Playbook, in my LinkedIn header. And shoot me a DM, or you can actually schedule a free e-commerce strategy session with me via the link on my LinkedIn profile. Would love to chat with you more. Always love to talk about the intersection of AI and e-commerce. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next week.